Welcome to the Ashland branch of the Pamunkey Regional Library for our program on birds raising families. Before we start, I'd like to go over a couple of housekeeping items. We are recording, as you know, so if you don't want your picture in here, please keep your camera off. You will have an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the program, but if you have questions during the program, please go ahead and put them in the chat box, and one of our speakers will be monitoring that so that we can get your questions answered. We ask that you keep yourself muted unless you are invited to speak, and in the unlikely event that we get bombed and we can't take care of it from this end, we will shut the program down. So if that happens, don't be surprised, but you'll know something's going on before that actually happens, I'm sure. So just to be sure that we're all good with that, we're about ready to go. I am Carol, I'm your moderator today, and we have Dorie, Becky, and Susan from the Virginia Master Naturalists Marine Chapter who are going to tell us about birds raising families. And one more thing before we get started, I forgot. If you have in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you have a item that says View. And if I suggest you turn that to speaker view for right now so that you can see everything that we've got to share with you, okay?
All right, hi. Welcome to Birds Raising Families. I'm Dorie, and as Carol said, I'm joined by Becky and Susan. We're all Master Naturalists. Becky and I are going to take turns speaking, and Susan will answer your questions in the chat box. So you can ask any questions related to birds, put them in the chat box, and then at the very end, we'll answer some of the questions out loud, and you can also unmute your microphone and ask questions out loud. So the Pamunkey Library reading program is called Tales and Tales. Get it? Right? Tales and Tales. T-A-L-E-S means stories, and that means the books you're reading this summer, and T-A-I-L-S, tails, well, that's what animals have, right? That extends from their butt and sometimes waves in the air. Birds have tails too, which you usually can't see because they're covered with tail feathers. So June's theme for the reading program is birds, and this program is about how birds raise families. In Virginia, this happens mostly in the spring and summer. And when is that? That's right now. So actually, after this program, you can go outside and you can see some birds raising families, and you can apply some of what you've learned right outside. So we're going to jump right into it. Bird families come in all sorts, just like human families. Most bird families have a mom and a dad around, but not all. Some are raised by moms alone, and some even by dads alone. Some bird families have brothers and sisters that help out, or even aunts and uncles or other adult birds that help out the family. They need a lot of the same things that human families need. What do human families need? Let's think about that. What do you need at home? Well, human families need food, right? A safe place, warmth, or sometimes you need coolness, like especially when it's really hot like yesterday, and protection from the elements and from predators. We don't have to worry about that so much, but birds do. And I think you remember what predators are. Predators are animals that eat other animals. So most bird parents have to work really, really, really hard to raise their families. And you'll be able to see that when you go outside. And honestly, I tell you, we are going to talk about nests, eggs, hatching, leaving the nest, and what people can do and maybe shouldn't do to help bird families. We're going to show a lot of types of birds. We're going to feature this bird. I have a book from the library, dun, da, da, and it's got our featured bird on it. It's a cardinal. That really beautiful red bird is the male, and I'm going to show you the female. It's on another page in this book. Here's the female, and she's a beautiful orangey color. So why are we using the northern cardinal as one of our special birds to show? Because it's the Virginia state bird, and it's a state bird of 6 other states, right? All right, Becky, can you name all 6 states? I'm putting her on the spot.
Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, Virginia, North Carolina.
Oh, you were really good. Did you say Illinois? Did you say
Yes.
Illinois? Oh,
Yes.
wow. Becky has learned this really well. Even I couldn't have done that. So good job. We're going to talk about a few, lots of different birds besides a cardinal, but which is a kind of songbird, making that beautiful song outside and nesting in the late spring and summer. We're also going to use as an example this bird. Who knows what this is? Doo-doo-doo. It's a raptor, which is a bird of prey, meaning it eats live things. It's called the osprey or fish hawk, and there's lots of them around. One reason I'd like to talk about the ospreys, because here's another library book. This is a beautiful library book. Okay, whoops, that's not an osprey, because its nests are like that. So people put up a pole for it and a platform, and then oftentimes it builds its huge nest right on top of that, or even on a telephone pole or a power pole. And sometimes, of course, in dead trees too, which is what the poles are supposed to kind of mimic. Okay, so the cardinal, the osprey, and we're going to, where's my book? Here's my book. We're also going to talk about, as using as an example, ducks and their babies, of course, ducklings. So with that, Becky is going to talk about nests.
Okay, nests. Ever wonder why birds build nests? One purpose. They build nests to raise their families. Nests are not a home that they live in year-round. It's just for raising the family. So they build it, lay the eggs, the chicks hatch, they raise them till they leave. When the babies grow up and leave the nest, the parents leave too. So it's just like a nursery. Like when we have human babies and have them in a crib and a nursery, that's what a nest is. It's just a nursery for raising the family. Now, you've probably all seen a bird's nest, or at least pictures of birds' nests in books. And you may realize that birds' nests come in all shapes and sizes, all different types. The most common shape is called a cup shape because it looks like a cup or a little bowl, kind of like these. You see, this one's a little shorter and wider, and this one's a little bit less big around and taller. So different shapes and sizes to those little cup nests. But this is a common thing, common size. The most common type of nest is a cup nest. But some of these cup nests will have a roof over top of them, or they could be hanging from a tree branch like a hanging basket, or they can even be flat. They have varying sizes and shapes. Another type of nest is called a cavity nest. It's called a cavity because it's something that a bird can go into. So you're probably familiar with nesting boxes. Those are wooden boxes you can buy in a store, or a lot of people build them themselves and then put them up in their yards. A cavity nest is also commonly a hole in a tree trunk. So you probably thought about owls and some types of chickadees, various types of birds will go into a hole in a tree. The nests also come in many, many different sizes. From teeny tiny, the smallest kind of bird's nest is a hummingbird's nest, and it is this size. You see in my hand how small that is? It's only 1.5 inches wide. It's teeny tiny little nest. And then they get bigger and bigger and bigger, and eagles make the largest kind of nest. It is huge. It's most commonly about 5 or 6 feet big, wide. That would be bigger than your kitchen or dining room table. It's huge. Here's a picture of one in a book. This book is called Animal Architects. And here's a picture, if you can see it very well, of a bird's nest. This is an eagle's nest. It is really huge. This one is 9.5 feet across, which would be about the size of 2 people laying down to end. And the height is about 20 feet tall. That'd be over 3 people laying down end to end. And you'll never guess how much this nest weighs. It weighs over 5,000 pounds. It is huge. So eagles build the largest nest, and hummingbirds build the smallest, and there's everything in between. And I've got some real nests to show you that I have found. They're both cup nests. This one is teeny tiny. You can see inside there, it's made out of various kind of grasses, it looks like. I do not know what kind of bird made this nest, but it's teeny tiny. And this one's a bigger one. It's also a cup nest. You can see inside there, it's got some sticks in it and some leaves. You can see on the bottom, there's a leaf right there. So there's leaves and twigs and grasses, all sorts of things, making this little cup nest. Put that down over here. Now, I was just talking about some of the materials that birds use to make nests. They use all kinds of materials, but mostly they use what's available to them, what they can find, and what they know how to use. Not all birds know how to use every single thing, but they find natural things. So they like sticks and bark, pine needles and leaves and roots, grasses, weeds, straw, mud and clay, the fur-like covering that goes on burrs of plants, spider webs, flower petals, animal hair like cat and dog fur or horse hair, and down and feathers from chickens, just anything they can find, all sorts of things. I want to show you this picture. Here's a picture of a cardinal's nest. And cardinals use grasses and twigs mostly, sometimes some bark as well. This one in this picture looks like it's mostly sticks and grasses. That's what a cardinal's nest could look like. And here's a hummingbird. Well, now it's blown up to make it big enough to see. But if you can tell too much, hummingbirds use plant materials, plant fibers. If you can see these little white squiggly lines in here, you'll never guess what those are. They are pieces of spider web silk. So hummingbirds make their nests held together by spider web silk. I think it's just so amazing. This is what this book looks like. This book's called Birds Make Nests. Really nice book. Now, before a bird can make a nest, he has to choose a location. And birds' nests can be almost anywhere. Most common places are in trees and shrubs. Some birds build them way up high, like at the very tip tops of trees or on top of a mountain or a rock cliff. And some build them way low. They build them right on the ground or under the ground. Some birds will burrow underground and build a nest under the ground or build a nest that floats on water. They can build them most anywhere. And I've got the same book, shows a picture of some strange places. Birds put most of their nests in trees and shrubs that we expect, but they put them in strange places as well. Look right here. Can you see what that is? It's a stoplight. This bird built a nest right here at the bottom of the stoplight. And here's an owl. He built his nest, or she built her nest in a barn. That's what's called a barn owl. And look here. Look at this picture. This is a gutter coming down from a roof of a house, the downspout. The birds put the nest right there on top of that downspout. And let's see over here. Look at that. On the top of a light pole. Would you ever think that would be a good place for a bird's nest? Birds put nests in all kinds of places that we would never expect. But basically, they're just looking for a place that is safe from all kinds of weather and from predators, and a place where they can find the materials they need to build the nest and can find food. Now, I want to show you a picture of this, or you might wonder, how do they make these nests? They gather all these materials, but how in the world can they do it? And that's the biggest amazing thing to me, because I could never build a nest from all these little natural materials. This book talks about how a robin makes a nest. It's called nesting. And first, they have to find the right spot. And this mom and dad here have chosen a spot right here in this tree. And so they start bringing pieces of grasses and just laying over the limb. And they keep bringing more and more and more, as you can see. And then they start getting enough, they can start making like a circle and more, so it looks like this, until it's finished. That's a lot of work to build a nest like that. And here's the finished nest with the bird sitting in it. You know how long it would take to build a nest like that? Some birds can build a nest in just a few days, and some who build bigger nests might take several weeks to build it. But this one was probably built in like 3 to 4 days. I think it would take me forever, and I probably never could do it. So birds are really amazing that they can build these nests. And I've got another book that talks about how a wren makes a nest called The Nest That Wren Built. It's a very similar process, but the wrens use some different materials. Here's the spot, and you can see they started right here. Those are twigs. So instead of the grasses, they're using little sticks. And then here, they've added some pine straw right down here. And in her mouth, right here is a piece of bark. And then here she's carrying a leaf to the nest. And she's taking some moss here. Moss is really good to make the inside of the nest really soft. For all the when the little babies are hatched, they want something really soft, and moss is a great thing to have on the inside of the nest. And here shows the final things. I've got some flower petals, and these are feathers that they found somewhere, and some string. You can see all the different materials that go into making that nest. So it's not just grass, it's a lot of different things in that nest. Once the nests are built, then it's time to lay the eggs. And Miss Doris will tell you all about eggs.
Oh, Miss Becky, that was so interesting. I kind of forgot what I was going to say.
Oh, no way.
I'm kidding. I'm going to get a book out of my personal library here. It's a big one. I'm going to get it. Oh, okay. It's called Birds of the World. And oh, it's very heavy, but I want to show all these pictures of eggs on it. Miss Becky talked about how nests are different sizes and shapes and made of different materials. Well, eggs are different sizes and shapes and obviously different colors too. I just wanted to show you that so you could get an idea of how varied they are. And I'm going to tell you a few of the reasons why. But first, do you want to see a cardinal nest again? I guess we've seen one. Here's a picture of one now. Oh, it's blown up really big. They're not actually that big. But look, they're speckled. Why do you think they're speckled like that? Well, eggs are quite tasty treats. If you're like me, you love eggs, and all sorts of animals like eggs. So one way to protect them is to camouflage them. So if they have some speckles on them, instead of being bright white, they're a little bit camouflaged. And I'm going to show you, guess what? I'm going to show you some real eggs that I have. Seriously, here is a real egg. Now, do you think I went out and got that myself? No way. If I got that myself, then I wouldn't have allowed that baby bird to be born. This actually was collected over 120 years ago. It was part of a collection owned by Pocahontas State Park, and they have special permits so they can have these eggs for education, and they lent them to me just for this program so I could show them to you. So look at the camouflage on this one. This is really big. This is a crane egg, and it's speckled so that if the parents need to leave the nest, it's not very obvious. But I also want to show this one to you because of its shape. Look how pointy that is. That's a lot pointier than chicken egg that you get at home, right? Well, that's because birds that lay their eggs on the ground with not a lot of nesting material make them this shape. So if they roll, they're not going to roll downhill and away. They end up, because of the point, rolling around that point. And so they more or less stay in place. That's crazy, isn't it? You want to see another egg? I have more. All right. Well, okay. It's in my hand here because I'm going to ask you a question, a quiz question. What kind of bird is not going to need camouflage on their egg? Well, think about it. They might not need camouflage on their egg because the eggs are so hidden away that predators can't really see them from far away. So that would be things that nest in cavities, which means like a hole in a tree. So who do you think does that? Yes, you got it. It's an owl. And here is an owl egg. Notice also that it's pretty rounded. because it's not on the ground and it's not gonna be able to roll around. It's in a, you know, hole in a tree, and it's white. So that's an owl egg. Okay, I got another one to show you. All right. Oh, check this out. A little blue egg. I am not 100% sure what that's from. Almost looks like a robin's egg, but not quite the right color. Why is it blue? Well, guess what? I don't know, and scientists aren't entirely sure either. There's a mystery. If you want to grow up and become an ornithologist, which is a scientist who studies birds, you could tell everyone, you could study why this egg is blue. Many different colors there on those eggs. One other question I want to answer for you, or I want you to answer for me, I want you to think about this question is, why in the world do birds lay eggs? Why don't they just have their babies live like humans do? And almost every mammal, not every mammal, but almost every mammal. Think about that. Okay, let's just think about that a little bit. So you're flying around in the air, and you're flying, and your wings have to hold up you and all your weight. Oh my goodness. If you have babies in your belly too, it'll be really hard to fly. If you have one, it'd be hard to fly. But if you want to have 4, like wrens usually have 4 eggs, or if you want to have 12, ducks usually have 12, that'd be impossible. So birds really continue to lay eggs because they need to fly and they can't carry all that weight around. I'm going to show you one more nest here. Okay, it's in a book. Oh, here we go. It's in this book I got from the library called Ducks, and it's a duck nest. Let me get that right up there. Now, wait a minute. Why don't those eggs have any camouflage on them? Why do you think? Let's look at that again. Well, you see that material around them? That is down. Those are the downy, soft feathers. The mother duck actually plucked them from her own body and put them in the nest. And they help keep the eggs warm at a good temperature, but also, unless she's super surprised off the nest, when she leaves the nest, she pulls all that down over like a blanket, and it camouflages the nest and keeps them warm. And that's why duck eggs don't have, most of them don't have camouflage on them. Well, that's it for eggs. We did eggs pretty quickly, but because you know what we need to go on to next? What happens next? Incubating and hatching the eggs. And Miss Becky's going to talk about that.
Yeah. Well, when the moms lay the eggs, they don't lay all the eggs at one time. They lay them one at a time and maybe a day or 2 apart. So back to my robin book, here it shows once the nest was finished, then she can start laying the eggs. She lays 1 egg. And then maybe a couple of days later, there's 2 eggs. And then there's 3. And a few days later, she has 4. Then it's time to see what she's doing. She's sitting on them. You know why she sits on the bird eggs? It's to keep them warm. It's called incubation. And incubation is all about keeping the eggs at the right temperature so the babies can grow inside. So she can't get them too hot or too cold. So mostly she sits on them to keep them warm. Well, if she's sitting on them almost all the time to keep them warm, you might wonder, well, gosh, how does she get to eat? She's got to get hungry because she'll be sitting on these eggs for maybe up to about 2 weeks. Larger birds might sit on those eggs for maybe 3 weeks. Well, she can leave once in a while to go get some food and water, but she can't be gone very long. So mostly the dads bring food to the moms. The dads feed the moms while she's sitting on the eggs and incubating them. And she can come off to let them cool off a little bit. They start getting too warm. She can come off, let them cool off a little bit, but then she has to get back on. So this is a long process. And the cardinals are one bird that do that. The dads do feed the moms. And the moms never leave if it's bad weather. If it's raining or really, really cold, the moms never leave the eggs during that kind of weather because she's got to keep them warm enough. So it's a lot of work to keep the eggs warm and the mom fed, dad finding food for it. It's a lot of hard work. Raising a family is a lot of hard work. But once the babies have grown enough, It's time to hatch. And you might wonder, how do those little tiny babies get out of those eggs? How do they hatch out of the eggs? Well, it's really cool. They have what's called a hatching tooth that grows on the top of their beak, and it's kind of pointed up a way that's kind of sharp. And they also have a strong special muscle in their necks that allows their necks to bend upward. And it's really strong, so they can raise it real powerfully and just force their way right through, crack right through the eggs with that tooth and that muscle, and just crack the egg right open and come right out. It's a lot of force. So it's really neat how they hatch. And most all the babies hatch at the same time. Well, when they're born, have you ever seen a newborn baby bird? They look kind of like this. There's no feathers and they're blind. Can you see that very well? They're really little and helpless. And with no feathers, they'll still get cold. So the mom has to still sit on those babies to keep them warm until they grow some feathers. It takes about a week for them to get some feathers in. They also get very, very hungry. Baby birds want to eat like all the time. So mostly the dad, but the moms too. The moms and dads go and get food for them to eat. Here's a picture of what they look like in the nest. See how their heads are bent back and their little mouths are straight up and wide open? The baby birds are like that most of the time. So the parents are going back and forth. Go find something for them to eat, put in the mouth, go back and find something else for another one to eat, come back and drop it in the mouth. It's a lot of work flying back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. They can get really tired. You might wonder, well, what do the baby birds eat? We saw in this picture, you know what that is, right? That looks like a worm, doesn't it? They eat a lot of worms, they eat lots of caterpillars, and they also eat insects. Cardinals feed their babies a lot of insects. And when the babies get a little bit older, they can eat seeds as well. So caterpillars, worms, insects, and seeds are what they eat. Now, another big job of the parents while they're raising the babies is to keep them safe. And the main thing you think about is predators. And we've mentioned predators. Those are animals that might come and want to eat the eggs or the babies or harm them in some way. You know what kind of animals are predators of baby birds and the eggs? It can be a lot of different types of animals. It can be larger birds like a hawk or even a blue jay or a crow. It's mammals like raccoons and squirrels, chipmunks, weasels, and cats. But the worst predator of all, you'll never guess, it's a snake. Snakes are the worst predators. So birds try to do everything they can to protect the babies. And one thing they do is when they're building the nests is to try to prevent predators from being able to come. So the main thing they do is hide the nest. They'll hide them in the trees or the shrubs or on the ground. They want to make sure that the predators can't find the nest. Some, I can find this picture. Oh, I can put something really unusual inside the nest. Let's see. Got so many books here. Here we go. See if you can see what's inside this nest. Can you tell what's inside, what this is inside the nest? That is a snake skin. A lot of predators are afraid of snakes as well. And if a predator starts approaching a nest and sees a snake skin, he'll think it's an actual snake and go away. So this is a way to protect the nest and the babies and the eggs, is to put a snake skin hanging over the side of the nest, just like that. But sometimes, no matter what you do, a snake or another predator can still come. And so I'll show you this picture. I don't know if you can see this too well. You see this picture? There's a tree and the nest is up in the tree right here. And down here, can you see that? It's a snake slithering across the grass, heading toward that tree in the nest. And all of a sudden, oh no, the snake has gone up the tree and is looking down at the nest. Look at the parents. Don't they look afraid? They are doing everything they can to get that snake to go away. They can swoop and dive bomb at it. They can make a lot of noise and scream and yell at it. They just do everything they can to get that snake to go away until eventually it does. The snake falls back, falls out of the tree and back down to the ground. The parents have saved the baby, saved all the little birds in the nest. It's a lot of work. Those parents have to do so many things to take care of their little babies and to keep them safe. So Miss Dorie's going to tell you now about what happens when the babies grow up and it's time for them to leave the nest.
Oh, Miss Becky, thank you so much. That was really interesting, and it was a little scary too, but I'm glad that those parents saved their babies from, from the snake. Okay, so what is it called when the birds leave the nest? It's a special word. It's called fledging. So when the birds leave the nest, they're fledging. I'm going to show you first. I'm going to share a video with you of a cardinal fledging, and you are not going to believe. I think that this is a cardinal because it looks so not much like a cardinal. Here we go. That's a cardinal baby. And its nest is in a hanging plant. The nest is in there. It's walked out of the nest. So that's why you can't see the nest. And it's thinking about flying. It's really thinking about it. Hardly looks like it could fly. Kind of silly looking, really. A little downy feathers sticking off of it and that big mouth. Big yellow mouth. Oh, that's it. It's gone. So that's a cardinal fledging, just like that. So it was in the nest a couple of weeks with its parents feeding it. And then, well, it's kind of dangerous to stay in the nest because predators can find the nest. It's actually better for it to fly as soon as possible. So how about one of our other birds, the osprey? What do? Well, here's a picture of an osprey. It's actually practicing. So they're up there on the nest and they've got a string. Whoops, I think that's me. Hang on just a sec. Let me turn that off. Okay. The video is still going, or a video. So they're in the nest and, well, they have to get new muscles to fly, right? Think about when you've done something new, like learn to bike ride. Yeah, you got to exercise those muscles. So you can pretend to be a baby bird. You're in the nest. You got to get those wing muscles to strengthen. So they practice flapping a whole lot, and they flap and they flap and they flap. And then they start flapping. They actually raise up in the air, and then they go back down on the nest. And they raise up in the air, and they go back down on the nest. And then finally, they're big enough to fly. And the first brave one will fly out of the nest. And I have seen this sometimes, that there might be one of the babies that's a little bit hesitant or afraid. And it kind of looks over, it's not sure that it wants to fly. And the parents will actually come near and they'll encourage that baby to fly by calling to it and encouraging it to fly. Now, of course, there are some birds that leave the nest without flying. Now, how do you think that happens? And what kind of bird would that be? Well, we're back to our ducks. Their nest is on the ground and their parents don't actually feed them. Uh-oh, parents are not bringing food to them. They're expected to find their own food. So as soon as they're just a couple days old and their downy feathers are all dry and they've recovered from hatching out of the egg, they just walk right out of that nest and they get in the water and they start swimming and they feed themselves. And that's how they fledge. Then, well, the kind of crazy ones, the ducks that nest way up in trees. Which ones are those? The nests way up in trees? Well, wood duck is one. So they make a nest in a cavity, so in a hole in a tree, 30 feet up, 40 feet up, maybe 50 feet up. And those babies hatch out and the parents don't bring them food and the babies start to get hungry. So what do they do from 40 feet up in a tree? They jump right out and they fall 40 feet down and they just bounce off the ground. Hopefully it's leaves and soft stuff. And because they're so young that their bones aren't fully formed, they're very flexible and they just sort of bounce and they're fine. And then they get in the water too. So those are some of the ways that birds fledge. And then what happens after they leave the nest? Well, the parents have to care for them at least until they're fully grown, or at least until the young can care for themselves. So it depends on what kind of bird it is, but usually for the smaller birds, the songbirds, the cardinals, after a few weeks, that's it. They're on their own. The babies are on their own. The parents may go off and build another nest and raise another whole brood of young. Now with the osprey, they only have one family, one set of chicks a year because it takes them so long to grow up enough and fledge. And then the parents have to show them how to hunt and so forth. And then they'll have another brood the following year. So many different ways for birds to raise their families, to build nests, to put their nests. They use different materials. They have different kinds of eggs. They protect them different ways. They fledge in different ways. Now, your challenge is to go on outside and see what you can see outside your own door. And this is a really good time because there are a lot of baby birds around. I am seeing so many young bluebirds, particularly bluebirds and wrens and cardinals and blue jays. So you can find them. Now, before we end this, Miss Becky is going to tell you some important ways you can take care of birds in your backyard. So, Becky, I'll turn it.
Okay, there are a lot of things that we can do to help birds and things that we shouldn't do that also helps them. So I have a list of do's and don'ts for helping the birds. As for nesting, you can put up nesting boxes. We talked about how people buy or make wooden boxes. You can put those up in your yard. You can plant trees and shrubs that will provide a place for nests and shelter. And if you put ones that have berries or fruit on them, that also will give food to the birds. You could hang some building materials out in your yard, like some string, yarn, or twine, but be sure to use natural colors because like a bright red would attract predators to the nest. But put natural colors. You can hang these things over a tree branch or a fence, a place where the birds can find them. As far as food and water, you can put out bird feeders. And it's especially a good idea to put out foods that are high in protein, like peanuts and suet and mealworms. You can plant flowering plants because that's where the bugs live. You can find the caterpillars and the spiders, all kinds of insects are on the flowering plants, and they make good food for the birds. And you can provide water by putting up a bird bath. And it can be really simple. It doesn't have to be a fancy, expensive bird bath. You can just put a pan of water out in your yard, just set it on the ground. The most important thing about water, though, is you need to keep it clean because that prevents diseases and mosquitoes from hatching out and making the water just even worse. Now, for safety, you could build a brush pile. That's where you get a whole bunch of tree branches that have fallen and stack them up, kind of space them so there's spaces in between them, and the birds can go in there for shelter. Also, now, a lot of parents may not want to do this, but you can leave your yard a little bit messy. Don't cut down the dead trees or the dead bushes or even dead flower stalks, because all these things are places that birds can hide for safety, and they can use the materials for building nests, all kinds of things. It's really good to leave your yard a little messy. You can keep your pets indoors, or if you do let them outdoors, put a collar on that's got a bright color, like a bright red, bright yellow color on it, or a bell that rings to alert birds that the cat or dog is nearby. And if you do happen to find a nest, you should stay away from it, because if you are near the nest, you can leave your scent there and predators will be attracted to it. So you need to stay away from birds' nests so you don't bring predators to the nest to harm the birds or the eggs. Now, the same thing, what do you do if you find a baby bird on the ground? The best thing you can do is leave it alone. Now, it really kind of depends on what size the bird is. If it's a fledgling, you definitely need to walk away immediately and leave it alone, because that baby is learning to fly. And I can guarantee you the parents are really close by watching. So you need not interfere with that process. It's totally stay away. If it's a nest that's fallen out of a tree and it's a very young baby bird, you probably need to leave it alone too, but you need to look around to see if you see the nest. You look up, see if there's a nest, or look around a tree or bush, see if you can find a nest. But get your parents and they can look at the situation and see if it's possible to put the bird back in the nest or the nest back in the bush. But really the best thing to do is to call a wildlife rehabilitator. And that person can come and look at the situation and determine what the best thing to do is. So those are some things you can do or not do to help birds raise their families. Okay.
So did there was a question about fabric scraps? Are those good for nest building?
Yes, they are. You can cut them in strips about 5 inches long, about maybe like this. Don't get any longer than that, because if they're longer, the birds can get tangled in them and maybe get choked. But about this long and maybe 1/2 inch wide, something like this, just strips of fabric. And again, use natural colors so they won't attract predators. Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, I thought so too. Would anyone like to unmute themselves and ask a question or give a comment? Particularly some of our young viewers, if you would like to talk about a bird you saw or your favorite bird, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I have a question. Sometimes the best time to see a nest is when all the leaves have gone from the tree and it's wintertime and you can see that there is a nest. Will a bird come back to the same nest, or do they always build new nests?
That's a good, I can answer that one. Most birds do not reuse a nest. There are a few who do, but most, like songbirds, do not. They build a new nest every season, maybe even more than one. They have more than one brood per season. So if you find a nest in the wintertime, it's probably abandoned and won't be used again. So you could take it if you wanted to collect. There are some birds who will use somebody else's nest from a previous year that they'll find it, but it's not as common.
Yeah, and we talked about a few of the birds that reuse their nests. That bald eagle nest that Ms. Becky showed you,
Right.
they built that up in one season? No way. They added to that year after year. And maybe one year there'll be so much weight, it'll crack and fall out of the tree, and then they'll have to start a new one.
Yeah.
And also the osprey like to go back to the same one. But those are the really big, obvious ones.
The large birds reuse their nests, but the songbirds, it's not very common for songbirds to reuse their nest.
Any other questions?
I'm going to make a comment about the nest, collecting nests. I understand that we're really not supposed to collect the nests unless we have the proper permits. Dorie, do you know anything more about that?
So any migratory bird, the bird that's not here year-round, is protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. And that is why you have to have a permit to collect eggs. These are from migratory birds, and that's to protect them. Now, our year-round birds like cardinals aren't protected under that Migratory Bird Treaty Act, so you actually could collect their nest. I would say if you're, collecting nests, maybe 1 or 2 is enough, just so you can, look at it very closely and leave the others out in nature for people to enjoy and look at from afar. And just, in case you're unable to exactly identify it as well, then you can be sure you're not getting a migratory bird nest. That was a good question.
I had a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I had a young friend tell me that you can get bird mites from a nest and that they're very difficult to get rid of if you get them. Is that true? Did my young friend know what she was talking about?
Yes, that's exactly right. These mites do get in the nest. They're little teeny tiny little critters. They're about the size of a tick, maybe. They're very similar to that. And they can eat the nest. They can eat the grasses and all the fibers that make up the nest. And one thing some birds do to address that is to put a spider's egg sac in the nest. So when those spiders hatch, the spiders will eat the mites.
That is
Yeah.
so fascinating.
Isn't that neat?
That's the other part of your question. The mites are specific to the birds. They won't get on people. So sometimes, well, for me, for instance, I worked as a biologist and ornithologist, and I actually had birds in my hand that I was putting tags on so we could study them. And sometimes I would see one of those mites and they were kind of big compared to the size of the bird, but I wasn't worried they would get on me because they didn't want to be on me. They wanted to be on a bird. Any other questions?
Sometimes we see bird feathers just on
Yes,
the
I
ground.
saw some bird feathers on a new dog in that image.
Nice.
Yeah. So is it okay to pick up a bird feather and keep it?
Well, it's the same thing along with the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. So you aren't supposed to have any parts of a migratory bird. And it's not really directed toward the casual person. It's so that there's a law that could be enforced if people are collecting whole birds, killing birds for their feathers and so forth. But still at the same time, you should not collect feathers of a migratory bird. So something that lives year round in your neighborhood, like our northern cardinals, you could legally have those feathers. If you want to take a feather though and look at it for a while and then put it back out in nature to decompose, or for a bird to use in its nest, for instance, that's a good idea.
So birds sometimes use feathers in their nest like that, a whole feather?
They occasionally do, yeah. Even so, we saw in the duck nest that they pluck their own feathers, and then
that's the down. That's the little tiny.
Right, the downy feather.
Down feathers.
Yeah. And then it's not as common as other things, but they'll use all sorts of stuff in their nest. It depends on the species. Some birds are really particular, like those hummingbirds with their spider silk and the, lichen on the outside. And other birds, sometimes their nests end up looking a little bit trashy because they'll gather all sorts of stuff. That's also why, it's important not to litter, because birds will put things like fishing line in their nests, and that's plastic and doesn't break, and they can get tangled up in it.
Is there a resource that you recommend for identifying feathers or birds?
Becky, do you want to answer
Well,
that?
I don't know a specific one, but there are a lot of field guides that are available. I've used the Audubon and Peterson, various field guides for identifying birds.
So I have some to recommend. Maybe actually, Susan, you can look this up while I'm talking. There's something online called the Feather Atlas that people swear by. They see that's great for identifying feathers. Susan's going to try and get that URL for you. In terms of identifying birds, of course, books are great to use, and I had some books around, but I get something for children. There are many bird guides that you can hold in your hand that are for children, so they don't have hundreds of species. They have the more common ones. You can also get online and use some apps. I highly recommend an app called Merlin. Put it on your smartphone, and then it finds your location. So it will know what kind of birds are most commonly seen in your location. Then you enter the colors of the bird and where you saw it, and it will pull up for you the most likely birds, and you can look through those and see if you found it. So Merlin is a great app. And you can Google Feather Atlas online if Susan can't find it in time.
Oh,
Sorry.
do you have spell Merlin?
Oh yeah, Merlin is MERLIN. That's the app.
Thank you.
For your smartphone. You bet. That's a great one. Love that. And then once you start using that, there's other apps too. There's one called BirdNet where you can listen to a bird song or call and identify it. So it's BirdNet. That's an app for your smartphone.
Oh,
oh yeah, amazing.
We used to here at this house where I live, there would be a bird that would sing or do its thing at night, and I could not find anywhere that bird.
All night long?
Huh?
All night long, or just at twilight and sunrise?
No, it was in the dead of the night. You could
And
go
what did it
out
sound like?
almost all night.
What did it sound like? Can you repeat it?
Oh gosh. Oh no, I couldn't, but it was,
Well, there is the whippoorwill. You go, whippoorwill.
oh no. No, it's
Its
I
name.
figured it was a predatory bird. I mean, just
Mhm.
because, but it, all the owls and I, got some things to try to find, and it didn't seem to be an owl, and we
So
never.
this would be a great one to try and record using BirdNet. And then it actually submits it to the server in Germany where it analyzes the snippet that you've sent it.
The bird hasn't returned, but it was there like for 2 years, and there's the bird net.
Yep. Bird, N-E-T. It's an app. Download it onto your smartphone. You record the bird song, and you don't even need to be totally close to it. It's amazing. And then you send it off, and in a few seconds, it comes back what it most likely is. Really, it's incredible.
Oh, I would love to have had that, because my neighbor and I, we tried so hard to find, because once it got dark, then it would come out and we could never find it.
Yeah.
Ever see
Oh,
it?
that's so interesting. A mystery there.
And there was more than one too, because there would be one over there,
Oh.
way over there, and they'd call to each other.
Oh. Yeah. And this was in Virginia? Hmm. Nice.
I'd like to add a couple of resources. You mentioned calling wildlife rehabilitators if you find a baby bird on the ground and don't know what to do. A resource or two resources for that. There is the Wildlife Center of Virginia, which is a statewide organization that does wonderful work, and they have a list of rehabilitators. And more locally, there's also a Richmond Wildlife Center that is like the Wildlife Center of Virginia, but it's newer and smaller, and but it should have contact information. So they're easy to get a hold of if you need help.
And Carol, I'd like to add that we're going to be sending 2 lists that are associated with this program. One is a long list of home activities, things that children would enjoy, how to build a birdhouse, how to make a bird list and look for birds, how to build a nest, lots of fun games for children. And the second list is bird resources, which is a long list of the books that the Pamunkey Library System has related to birds. Those 2 lists might be helpful.
Okay, and once I get those, I will be able to send those to the participants registered for this program.
Okay.
Okay, do we have any more questions, thoughts? Well, thank you, Dorie, Becky, and Susan. It's been a wonderful program, very interesting.
Can I bring up just one thing? We are so fortunate that we have someone on this program who really knows a lot about birds, and Diane has sent us a message to everyone about cardinals migrating. Almost all native birds are federally protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, which I talked about. Non-native species such as starlings, rock pigeons, house sparrows, and mute swans are not protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. So that includes nests, feathers, and eggs. So I think what Diane is telling us is that even some of the birds we think are here year-round, they may be, but it may be other individuals who have migrated from further north and are down here, and our individuals have gone further south. So to be on the safe side, all they're protected, their nests, feathers, and eggs, and that is so great. It makes me so happy to know that. Thank you, Diane, for pointing that out and making sure that we let everyone know. And I'm really glad that our birds are protected, aren't you?
Okay, I'd like to point out too that we have a program here at the library coming up on July 7th on creating backyard habitat using native plants. So that would tie into caring for the birds and the animals in your yard as well. So I hope you'll sign up for that and come join us then. And otherwise, any more questions, thoughts? Thank you everybody for coming and joining us today. We hope you've had a good time. I certainly have. And thank you, Dorie, Becky, and Susan for putting together a wonderful program. So everybody, have a good rest of your day, and thanks for being here. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.